Okay, this is a problem. There's supposed to be a painting here, and not just any painting. It was the most expensive painting in Britain. 3 weeks earlier, a London gallery paid a ridiculous amount of money for a painting. 10,000 guineas. Okay, it doesn't translate, but in today's money, it's somewhere between $1.5 and $2 million. And yes, that sounds wild, but this was a Gainsborough. And the woman in the portrait? She wasn't just anyone. She was the Duchess of Devonshire. Glamorous, commanding, and followed by scandal wherever she went. And now, she had vanished. No broken glass, no witnesses, just a clean-cut canvas and a very expensive absence. The newspapers called it the crime of the century. Scotland Yard called it a nightmare. Whatever you call it, it was a heist and a very strange one. So who took the most expensive painting in Britain without leaving a trace? His name was Adam Worth, an American master criminal who made robbery look effortless. He stayed one step ahead of the police and slipped across continents without firing a single shot. And here's the part that throws people off. He was a gentleman and dressed impeccably even during robberies. The kind of man who looked more like a banker than a bank robber. He felt like a fictional character. And honestly, he kind of was. Many believe he inspired Professor Moriarty, Sherlock Holmes' arch nemesis. But that reputation didn't come from myth, it came from what he did next. When Britain's most expensive painting vanished, it wasn't long before people began to suspect a particular kind of thief. Someone patient, brilliant, and audacious enough to take it. Someone who had earned the nickname the Napoleon of Crime. So newsflash, Worth took the painting. But after stealing it, instead of cashing in, he kept it for 25 years. Why? There are many speculations as to the why. One version is simple. He needed money. His brother was in jail, and bail doesn't come cheap. That explains the theft. It doesn't explain the keeping. In another version, Worth is a romantic fool. Because according to that story, when he saw the portrait hanging in the gallery, he didn't see a duchess. He saw Kitty Flynn. Kitty was what you would call his first love. A sharp-tongued barmaid from Ireland, Kitty ran a champagne bar in Paris with Worth, which doubled as a front for his illegal gambling operation. For a while, it was great. They ran their little empire like partners in crime and life until she left him and married someone else. Worth, he never got over her. So to him, the painting wasn't a portrait of a duchess, it was Kitty. Maybe the resemblance was real, maybe he just needed it to be. Either way, that painting became the only version of Kitty he could have. So who was the woman staring back from the canvas? She was Georgiana Cavendish, the Duchess of Devonshire. And Georgiana wasn't just well known, she was the it girl of Georgian England, and one of the two best-dressed women in London high society. Yes, there was absolutely a competition. If Georgiana wore it, you can bet your money that London would follow. Even her hairstyle piled almost a yard high, decorated with jewels, fruit, and birds? Think Marie Antoinette, London version. So by the time Gainsborough painted her in 1785, Georgiana knew exactly how to turn clothing into spectacle. But this time, she sparked a whole new craze. The hat. You can't miss it. And even more than the hat, the feathers. She didn't just wear ostrich plumes, she gave them status. They were huge, dramatic, and borderline ridiculous. One was supposedly 4 feet long, but suddenly everyone needed them. Milliners were slammed with orders for what became known as the picture hat. And rumor has it the craze drove up the price of ostrich feathers. But fashion is only half the story here. Look at her expression. She's composed, self-possessed, certain. This isn't someone dressing for approval. This is someone locking in an image. And for Georgiana, that image wasn't optional. In Georgian England, the aristocracy was the celebrity. Their lives were followed, dissected, and consumed like entertainment. And Georgiana had everything the public couldn't look away from: youth, beauty, and a title to match. London followed her every move and retold her scandals like an ongoing series. Some of that attention came from politics. She openly campaigned, took sides, and put herself front and center in public life. Something most women simply didn't do. But it was her personal life that kept people talking. Especially her marriage. She married young to a man who had everything except warmth. The Duke of Devonshire was distant, unreadable, and openly unfaithful in ways high society politely ignored. And the woman he chose wasn't a stranger. She was Georgiana's closest friend. Lady Elizabeth Foster didn't just visit the Devonshire home, she moved in and stayed. Georgiana ended up sharing her house and her husband while society looked the other way and whispered behind her back. But she refused to sit quietly inside the silence. She turned to fashion, gambling, and eventually, affection elsewhere. One of her affairs was with a future prime minister, and a child was quietly sent away at birth to protect appearances. Everything in her life lived under the weight of what people might say. In a world like that, image wasn't decoration. It was survival. So when she sat for Gainsborough in that hat, it wasn't accidental. And then quietly, the portrait slipped away. Long before Adam Worth, the painting had already vanished once, cut down, passed around, and forgotten. By the time it disappeared again, it already knew how. Worth smuggled the portrait out of England and across the Atlantic, packed into false-bottom trunks and wrapped like contraband. For years, the Duchess lived in private, shown only to the people Worth trusted. It was his prized possession after all, and he couldn't resist showing it off. But as the story goes, all good things must come to an end. In 1892, after decades of near escapes, Worth was finally arrested in Belgium. This time, he was going to prison. Though not for nearly as long as people expected. And that was partly because of William Pinkerton. Pinkerton was an American private detective who had spent years chasing Worth across Europe. He knew exactly who he was dealing with. But when the opportunity came to strengthen the case against Worth, Pinkerton stayed out of it. Worth was even released early for good behavior in 1897. And 2 years later, he reached out to Pinkerton. They met in Chicago, and there, Worth put everything on the table. He still had the Duchess, he wanted $25,000 for her return, and he wanted immunity. No questions asked. Inside a hotel room in Chicago, two men waited. One was an American private detective. The other was a nervous gallery owner from London. In the gallery owner's bag was a check for $25,000. Come in. A messenger entered carrying a brown paper-wrapped bundle. It took only minutes to confirm it was the real Duchess, and the messenger left with the check. It wasn't until much later the reports claim the messenger wasn't really a messenger at all, but it was Adam Worth in disguise. And that is the end of the heist. But not the end for Georgina. After the exchange in Chicago, the painting briefly returned to England, then crossed the Atlantic again. JP Morgan, yes, that JP Morgan, bought it for $150,000, roughly $5 million today, and kept it in its private collection for nearly 9 decades. And in 1994, more than 2 centuries after Gainsborough painted her, the portrait finally came home to England, to the Devonshire family's estate. A place tied to her name, if not her happiness. And here's a detail that feels almost too neat. Georgina was born a Spencer, from the same family line that would later produce Princess Diana. Georgina understood something early on, that once the public decides who you are, you either disappear inside it, or you learn how to use it. This portrait doesn't tell her story for us. It doesn't justify her or tidy her up. It simply lets her meet our gaze exactly as she chose to. Thanks for stopping by, and see you next time.